everyone, thanks for checking out the CB vlog this week. If you like what you're seeing, you know what to do. Hit subscribe. It really helps us out. Like, comment, all those things are always really great. Also, if you want to help us out even more, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/commandersbrew. You can help directly make the show there. Get in on the Discord, help us brew decks, stuff like that. Great. Without further ado, let's get to today's main topic, which is revisiting the staple binder. Now, if you guys are longtime listeners of the Commander's Brew, you'll know about the staple binder system, which has controversial beginnings in that I always give credit to a friend of the show and commander and host Phil DeLuca, and Phil DeLuca always gives credit to us. So the controversy is a friendly one in that we keep giving each other credit for it. However, it definitely was Phil. I promise you. Anyways, the staple binder, just to refresh, is the idea that you keep a couple of key, like expensive cards and rares and things like that in a separate little binder, or maybe it's a deck box, whatever it is, and then you swap them in and out of decks because you only have the one, right? And you want to, and maybe you don't want to be proxying things, so you want to, you want to have the actual card on you and show people, and so that way you can use it in many decks. It's kind of like whether you're playing it on Arena or Magic Online or something. You only need one copy of any given card to actually have it for all of your decks. So you're trying to emulate that system in real life. This is a system that we went hard on and into big time when we first started doing the show. We were big time advocates of it, still are really, because there's still lots of things to, lots of pros with this system, a lot of good things to it. There are also some cons, as I figured out over time, and specific cons maybe to the specific way we do it. But I wanted to get Sean, your thoughts on it, and just sort of get in and chat about where we're at these days when it comes to a staple binder or staple deck box system.
Okay, I got contributions.
Okay, so first of all, I want to talk about us and our personal history with it, and it's that since starting the show and definitely both doing the staple binder, we found better ways to do it. We've abandoned it, and then recently come back into it a little bit for kind of different reasons, I think. So first of all, I want to talk about the new, the upgrade method. We've talked about this before on the show. This one came to this idea, the better version of it came to me from our boy Vinny down in LA. Playing, you've seen him on game nights and stuff like that, buddies with Josh and Jimmy. His system is much simpler than the original system, and I think it's the way to do it, where you have a card in your deck. It's a proxy that'll say, doubling season. And then as you draw that card in your hand and as you go to play it, you literally have a little box or a little stack beside you with cards, whether they're in top loaders or whatever it is. And then you just, there's my doubling season. Bam, you reach over in your stack, you bring it out, you throw that on top of the card in your actual sleeve in your deck that you have, right? So you're not actually swapping cards in and out of an actual sleeve or deck or anything before or after games. You just have them beside you. Our friend Alistair has employed this method, and it's working great because it doesn't slow down the game at all, as we'll see, because that is kind of one of the cons of having a staple binder, is it can kind of slow down before and after games. But I think given given what we've seen, I think this is the most preferred way. Would you say?
I think so too, right? The original way was to do everything beforehand. Look through, we used to have a list and we're like, okay, I need these lands and these enchantments and these creatures, and we do everything before a game, and the game would finish. It was like, okay, now I need to take out these lands and these things. So yeah, this is just way faster, and yeah, this is a great method. And that you can't forget anything this way. You never actually remove card. Let's say your deck uses green sleeves. Yeah. You will never actually take one of those 99 sleeved cards, some proxies, out of that deck.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I've seen people use vastly different deck sleeve colors. I think Alistair uses bright orange sleeves to know that just in case it does happen to get shuffled back in. I know Vinny uses hard cases, the top loader kind. So
they don't even fit.
They will not be shuffled in ever. So those are both great methods to use. So it's funny because when we were doing it, we had the wrong way big time. We were, like Sean was saying, we had the list and everything. It got to the point where I like I'd play a deck, and then I would like be de-systeming it, and and I needed an in between deck to play for like the next game. So I built a whole deck outside of the system so that I could
Uh,
use that, and it was my Niv Mizzet deck, and I could play that in between. So that was my like in between deck, kind of.
while you were doing your homework.
Exactly. Then I would go do my homework with my Niv Mizzet deck in play, and then come back with a new deck. It was a mess. It was a mess, and there's no wonder I abandoned it shortly thereafter. But you know, I'm not. I certainly am not advocating that people abandon their staple binder systems. Find the version that works for you, and I think this way is better. This way is the best way to do it. But what I did want to talk about, though, past these improvements and past this sort of better method, is what are the pros and cons of having a system like this, and do like maybe some people, maybe some metas are due for a look at look at this thing and say like, do I even need this? Because ultimately that was what made me not go back into this new and better version, because I was like, well, I don't even think I need a staple binder system at this point. And not everyone, that's not true for everyone. I'm not saying everyone doesn't need it. I'm just saying, like, for me specifically, that was the case. So so pros and cons, any you can think of off the top of your head. Obviously pros are less money spent,
Yep.
more powerful decks in that you can have better synergy and you can use those cards that are more rare to find. Those are the obvious pros. But what are the cons, if any?
Yeah, I think one thing you like highlighted here, sometimes like it really lends your meta to power creep, and it if you in the power and what power creep is a con because it prevents new people from joining your meta. It is a barrier for newer people unless they immediately adopt the staple system. But even still, it's like, well, if they don't have their one copy of Expropriate so that all of their blue decks have an Expropriate, or even to use a cheaper card but still expensive, Cyclonic Rift, right? If a newer player doesn't own a Cyclonic Rift, you know, you could argue it's a small investment. You know, if you divide it over the 10 blue decks you have, that's only like, you know, a few bucks per deck. Mm-hmm. But still, a new player won't have 10 decks right away, so they won't be able to keep up.
Yeah, that's I think the main one that I would consider. There's also, I mean, coming with that, there can be a little bit of a stigma if you're, you know, using a system like that to beat all your friends who don't have those high powered cards, and you're like,
yeah,
you don't either. You have one of them, but they're in all your decks. It can create this kind of like this attitude or whatever towards it, right? So not everyone, again, that's not gonna happen every time, but it can happen, right?
Yeah, we're going to assume that our goal is the funnest games possible,
right?
Not and so like however that is defined for you, but I think we can all agree that the funnest game will be one where everyone is approximately the same power level.
Exactly. Which brings us to like, when we're talking about a staple, like, why do you need a staple binder system, and do you actually need one? I'll say that I think that if you're a person who's trying to keep up with a very powerful meta, this is an excellent way to do that. This is one of the best ways to do that, in fact. If you know, I mean, every time I go to LA and play with those guys, I feel like I wish I had my staple binder going, because down, you know, at game nights and all the crew who works on the show and friends of friends and everyone like that, man, those guys are running some high powered tuned decks. Like, they're running some really good cards. And it's not to say that my decks can't hang with them. They do. It does often. I've won playing with those guys. But, like, you know, there's a level of consistency there, right? And Commander evens it out. So, honestly, one of the arguments why maybe you don't really need it. But I do understand when people want to keep up with a high-powered meta, especially an expensive meta, maybe not even a power thing. It's more of an expensive thing. I think I wholeheartedly advocate to use a staple binder system there. Also, maybe you're not winning. You don't win because your cards, maybe you feel like you're a little underpowered. And it's like, I literally go to Commander Night every night and I never win. It's like, well, you should only expect to win about a quarter of the time, or less than that, maybe even. So I wouldn't worry too much about winning when you're playing Commander anyways. But if that's something you really feel like is hampering your fun, and you feel like your deck can't keep up because you never get to be winner or whatever, maybe then the Staple Binder is probably a decent thing to try out, because then it'll help your decks become a little more consistent, and that might give you what you're looking for. But what are reasons you might not need one?
I guess you wouldn't need one if your meta's pretty low powered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, you don't need it if you have a pretty low powered meta. You don't really need a Staple Binder. It's fine. If you're playing in different metas, that's an exception. If you're going and playing in some very high powered meta on Tuesdays, and then you're playing in your lower powered meta on Saturdays, for sure, go ahead, still use it, because that high powered meta might be a whole different thing. But if you're playing amongst people, budget players who aren't so worried about winning, and you definitely don't need to use it, because you're probably already winning. That's the other thing. If you're crushing, if your win rate is like very high, you definitely
and very
don't
very
need
high in Commanders, like 35%.
Yeah,
Like if you're playing 4-player games, even Stevens, you should be winning statistically 25%. If you're above 25% by more than 1 or 2, right? Obviously, like no one keeps statistics like this, and you need thousands of points of data for this to matter. But if you're like winning close to half your games, but still less than half, it can feel like you're losing more than you're winning, which you are, but you're winning more than you ought to be.
I have a story where I used to have an app that kept track of like wins and losses of games, and I would be pretty diligent about putting everyone's name in and their decks in and stuff. It was a great app, and when I changed phones, I lost it forever. But I remember looking at my one of my deck's win rates, my Afara deck, which was the flash and like kind of counterspelly deck, and it had it played like 8 games or something, and it had like a 70-something% win rate, and I was like, I don't think I need to put Staple Binder cards in this deck. You know what I mean? Like, it's obviously doing very well. Maybe if I don't apply those cards, or like take them out of the Staple Binder and put like, I'll put my Vidalcan Orrery in there, sure, and I'll put this other card in there, but like that's it, right? It's gonna bring the win rate down probably, but like that's okay. I was winning 70% of my games with that deck because of what it did and the power level it was at, right? So I mean that's to each their own, right? If you want to keep winning at 70% and keep crushing your meta, and I don't know, maybe making people like, hopefully you're not giving people feel bads. That's what I'm saying, right? You're not looking to do that, but I mean,
there are metas where it's like, maybe like I've heard of metas where one person is very experienced and everyone else is kind of new, and it's kind of always arch enemy with that person, but everyone thinks it's fun because everyone knows that, like, well, we know your decks are better than ours, but here's how we got to do it. And it can feel very quote unquote even when your like arch enemy superpower deck is fighting 3 newer decks, but they're just automatically teaming up on you. Like that can exist.
We did have that in our meta for a bit when we first started, right? Like Nick's decks were way better than ours, and we were always just teaming up on them. Yeah. And it was fun, and it kind of taught us about the format in general a little bit, but it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. You're right. And in fact, that was why I started like looking at proxies and looking at a staple system and things like that. Also, I wanted to point out that like proxies and staple binder system are different things, right? Like, a staple binder, you have the cards, they're there. Proxies are obviously controversial to some, depending on what you do. If you're printing out nice proxies, obviously people generally tend to not have a real big problem with that. If you're just scrawling the name on a basic land and putting it in your deck, some people might be like, hey, what's that? Both systems, both ways of doing it, I think are, they're fine. The only time I start to have an issue, and you can ask Mike Carosa this because I make fun of him every time it happens, is that like sometimes I'll look over and I'll see a bunch of lands with words all over them, like written in marker, and I'm just like, and those are the cards that are beating me. Like those are the cards that get. Now, mind you, Mike has a staple binder system. We just don't make him get the cards at every time. So to be fair, that's what's happening there. But like if you're playing against a person who doesn't have that system and they're just writing proxies out, or even if they're not, and those are the cards that are killing you, that feels a bit weird, which is why I like the staple binder system or the staple box a little better, because the cards are there. It's like, okay, I'm getting beat by that card, yes, at least you own it.
And it can also be said that it's a courtesy. Like a lot of us recognize cards visually by the art
Yes,
or
that's
certain things.
yeah.
So when you have like a version of the card, like when you actually pull it out of your staple binder and put it on your playmat in whatever sleeve or case it's in, your opponents can quickly glance and be like, oh, I see that doubling season.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be aware that, I need to prevent you from making too many tokens or counters.
Yes, exactly. And finally, I guess one of the things I mentioned earlier, talking about like maybe you playing two different metas, maybe you playing like a high-powered one, and then at your LGS, and then your home meta maybe is a little bit lower powered and more budget-oriented. And I think that's honestly, I think that's pretty normal for people. If they go to their store, it's going to be maybe you never know what level you're going to play at there. We're big advocates of different ways to tell the power level, and I think Sean, there's a vlog from a couple weeks ago where we talked about look at what the cards that are in there. It's like, are you playing with original duels? Are you playing with fast mana? Like, these are key things that can tell us.
Yeah, the shortcut that I like to think of is like, are you using a lot of cards that are considered in modern design like truly like they're like, oh, we made a mistake. Like cards that could not be designed by today's modern design standards.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's really happening, different decks are another option you could use if for some reason, like if you're looking to avoid using like a staple system or whatever. I'd say that if you're fortunate enough to be able to brew and have many decks, that's a more fun option actually, because you also up the variance of your different decks that way, and you can kind of deal with anything. But also looking at a staple system, I forgot what I was going to say. Hang on a sec. I was talking about lower power versus higher power. Oh, okay. Yeah, different decks you can have variants that way, and I think you're gonna have like you're gonna be able to play in more games more evenly that way, I think. So anyways, so what I wanted to say though, at the end of all this, whether you use one or not, if you're really into using one, I think it is a great system for the reasons we stated and in the times we stated, like in the occurrences or whatever, if you're in a high powered meta or whatever. But I think if you're looking to like even it out and you're not sure, maybe you're like, I am kind of winning a decent amount. My meta isn't that high powered, like, but I like the staple system because it's, it does save me money and things like that. There's nothing wrong with this. Nothing wrong with this at all. However, I would challenge you, and I did this to myself and eventually just said, it's fine, I don't need it at all, to like keep a cap on the number of cards you're using. And for a couple reasons. For one reason, I think like keep it at like I don't know, 10 cards. Like that's still a lot. You could even go less if you really wanted to try. But let's say you did it at 10 cards. That way your like creativity is going to have to take over for the rest of the cards. So if you're proxying like, or not proxying, but like a staple binder like 25 cards or something, like that's a lot. That's a ton of cards that you're moving in and out, and that's a lot of like it makes your decks a little more homogenous, which is like, I want to see spicy brews. I want to see different cards, right? I think a lot of people do, and it is more fun. I think you'll find you'll have more fun this way too. So
I mean, we have a whole section on surprises and discoveries. We would never surprise or discover ourselves with new cards if every single one of our decks was like, okay, it's green and blue, so here's my 25 staples of those colors. So now we only got to come up with 10 cards after I do my draw, my removal. It's like, yeah, like what is even your deck at that point?
Exactly. And I think like even if you cut it down to like 5 cards, you're going to challenge yourself to find those interesting different cards that are going to be cheaper, because I'm assuming we're doing this for budget, because I think that's the best reason to do it. So challenge yourself to keep it to like 5 cards, 10 cards, less than that, even 5 cards, and see how your decks look, like see how things change, what new cards you discover and things like that. I think that is the like optimal way to do it. I really do.
I'm into it, and I would almost even be more specific and say, though, of those ones that you are staple bindering, keep it to like ramp spells, keep it to like important lands, keep it to the things that don't necessarily affect the character of the deck, that just make the deck function more efficiently, right? That's going to be one of the main reasons some decks can compete and some decks can't, right? The deck that has Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Grim Monolith, and Sol Ring is going to be better than the deck that just has Sol Ring, no matter what, all other things being equal. But I would rather have my staples be those kind of utility cards rather than things like Doubling Season or Expropriate, which would, to me, are more deck specific. I guess you could argue that any deck wants Expropriate, but I want to, because that's an interesting flashy card. I want those to be real. The boring cards that just kind of make the deck run, those are my staples.
Interesting. I mean, if you're talking about ramp, you're probably talking about like really good artifact ramp.
Yep.
Because most ramp spells aren't really that expensive.
Yeah, sure. Things like that. I think that's because for me, that's where, like that. Then I get if the regular ramp spells aren't expensive, I don't need to do that. But it just comes down to like, well, to use Doubling Season as an example, right? Like if I own one Doubling Season, I probably have one deck that uses it amazingly. Mm-hmm. So, but if I've got a few decks that use counters, a few decks with Planeswalkers, I don't think I don't want to use my staple binder spots for those types of cards. Like I'd rather use my staple binder slots to make sure my deck keeps up no matter what. And then the rest is character and an expression of how I like to brew decks and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I think using for like key utility lands that, have jumped in price recently, or just stuff that's harder to find, I think you're going to be safe if you do that sort of thing. And yeah, whether it's you like to, you want to have a Consecrated Sphinx in your draw deck, which is like, that makes a lot of sense. But like but when you're using it to put it in every single blue deck,
yeah, it's like, that's where I wouldn't do that. Again,
if you're just keeping up with a high powered meta, you like do what you need to do, honestly. But if it's about, if it's not about that, it's about, what else can I use here? Is there anything else that does, a similar job? And if there is, then, try it out. You never know. Anyways, I think that's going to lead to just diversity in your deck building. It's going to lead you to discover new things. I mean, that's what it's done for us, right? Brewing on a budget, strict budget of $50 for the first, I don't know, what was it, like 150 episodes or something? I don't know how long it's been now, but and still we still keep our budgets in mind these days. It still breeds creativity. We've always been big fans of that and always said that. So I'd suggest looking out for it yourself too, even if you are using a staple binder system. Great. Well, thanks for watching this CB vlog this week. Go ahead and hit subscribe, share this with your friends if you liked it a lot. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye. Thanks for watching. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting the show by going to patreon.com/commandersbrew.
And if you want to get any of the cards from our deck list, go to our TCGplayer affiliate link below.
That helps us out too. And for a free way to help us out, consider sharing the show with some friends. Like and subscribe, add a comment or two.
See you later.
Bye.